Hello and welcome to Two Friends Watch. I'm Daniel and with me is my good friend Andrew.
Hello, how are y'all doing this fine evening?
How have you been this last week, Andrew?
I've been fine. I've been watching Zombieland, much like you, I believe.
It is a very good film and it is actually the subject of our movie choice tonight.
Yeah, this was your choice, but I think this is one we've both seen before, one we both love, one that's both been sort of a long linchpin of our movie evenings. This is I suppose you could say this is the end of phase one of the podcast, because this is the last movie on our initial list of films.
Yep, we do a list of 6 films, 3 each, and we do them alternatively week by week. And this is the last one of the first list.
Yeah, so we just decided to pick one just to cap things off that we both really enjoy and have historically enjoyed together. So, Zombieland. I love it. Why do you love it, Daniel?
I love it because it's got a bit of everything for everybody. It's got a bit of action, it's got a bit of romance, but not too much. Got a lot of comedy, a fair bit of gore, and just a little dash of horror here and there.
Just a bit. Because, I mean, you're not the biggest horror fan, and I know that, so it sort of says something of the crossover appeal of this movie that you're able to get into it as much as I am.
Oh yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are a few stereotypical and cliched jump scares here and there, especially in the scene where he goes into the haunted house. And,
Yeah.
a couple little jump scares there. But apart from that, nothing really too much in this movie that bothers me.
Fair enough. This is probably the most successful movie we've yet done on this show, I suppose. I mean, it was quite a hit back when it came out in 2009. It made it back about 4 times its budget or something like that. So,
Well, it's $60.8 million in 17 days.
which is impressive for a movie of its relative stature. I mean,
That's fairly impressive. That's substantial even by, Hollywood standards.
well, yeah, I mean, it's a fairly niche movie. It's mainly supposed to appeal to a certain breed of movie geeks, because there's a lot of intertextuality and a lot of in-jokes referencing various other movies. And, of course, the one legendary cameo, which we will get to in due course. But this is probably still, nevertheless, probably the most well-known film we've done on this show so far. So we'll try to keep things interesting. We'll try to give our own unique take on it.
Mm-hmm.
But first of all, I guess it is worth recapping the plots. So, really, the film doesn't dwell on the zombie apocalypse scenario too much. It takes place about 2 weeks in. There's a 28 days later.
Kind of feel to it.
Yeah, fast zombies, not Romero slow zombies. So, it's about 2 weeks into the viral infection, and you've got Jesse Eisenberg's character, who is referred to throughout the film as
Columbus.
Columbus, yeah, you're right. I get the character names mixed up. I'm not the best with American geography. All the main characters refer to each other by their sort of hometown.
Yeah. Well, I think is Columbus. I think that might be where he's actually heading to. I think the naming is actually by where they're going. So you got Columbus because he was going to Ohio to see if his parents were alive.
Yeah, well, for him, home and his destination are the same place, so I just kind of ran with that.
No, that's fair enough.
Anyway, he's, being Jesse Eisenberg, he's sort of this really neurotic shut-in type, really sort of quite neurotic geek who was locked inside his college dorm when the zombie plague broke out. And
Pretty much. He didn't really seem too bothered about it. I mean, he does have a bit of exposition explaining how before the zombie apocalypse, he used to avoid people like they were zombies. And now that they are zombies, not really that much different. You mean,
Yeah.
you see him, he's in a nice little flat sort of thing, apartment, and, he talks about surviving off of Mountain Dew and, just playing World of Warcraft all day, every day. And, he's really pretty much hitting every stereotype on the head.
Yeah, and sort of striking a bit close to the bone for people like us, but...
Very much so.
There you go. But nevertheless, he turns out to be surprisingly well equipped when the zombie apocalypse rolls around because he has no particular attachments and lives alone anyway, so he's able to survive quite expediently.
He lives off a set of rules.
Which he exposits to the audience at the beginning of the film. And it's all fairly pedantic stuff, like every time he's in a car he has to wear a seatbelt, and he's really fastidious about that. Every time he brings a zombie down, he has to double tap it, as he says. I think that's rule number 2.
Yeah.
Like rule number 1, cardio. You have to stay in shape because you have to be able to outrun the zombies.
Yeah, it was quite funny. Every rule's explained at the start, and it's done in a fun way. He's not just listing things off. It's done with a bit of nice graphics and some situations, which was quite funny. The cardio one was pretty funny. When the zombies attacked, of course, the first ones to go were the fatties. You just saw this rather large man running across, I think it was an American football field, just like in slow motion wobbling across this field as a zombie just tackles him to the ground.
And eats him.
It's
pretty wonderful.
Oh, it's really funny. And the little thing I liked about it, and I don't know why, it's just something I perhaps hadn't seen before and I quite enjoyed, was all of the rules were kind of graphically imprinted into the environment. So it'd be on like the back of a car and stuff like that. You could tell it was very obviously CGI, but it like the environment would react to it.
Yeah, it's a running joke throughout the film that something will crash into the graphic illustrating the rule and it'll break or fall apart or something like that.
Yeah, and it's always something ironic. So not wearing your seatbelt and then a car crashes into the rule and the woman in the example flies through the window and dies.
Yeah, there's a lot of quite visual playfulness in the film. The director, whose most recent film was Gangster Squad, actually, which was a real step down from this film, I thought, because it was this sort of pastiche of LA Confidential and stuff like that, but really wasn't that good looking at all. But this film has a real sort of visual inventiveness to it. A lot of sort of graphic cutaways and just sort of intercut scenes that are just sort of these random little funny cutaways, like Zombie Kill of the Week. Like it just you have this one scene where you get you see the most vivid zombie kill of the film.
It was that's the piano one, isn't it?
The piano that gets dropped on the zombie's head.
A zombie's chasing after a woman down a side of houses, and she's just walking away, and she looks at the zombie, smiles. I think does she pull on a bit of string or something, or does she just walk in?
She pulls on a chain, yeah, definitely.
That's it. She pulls on a chain and then walks in, and then as the zombie gets to the door to chase after her, this grand piano just squishes him into the ground.
Yeah. There's just a lot of little moments like that throughout the film that just quite a wry and irreverent sense of humor. It's very sharp.
Oh, yeah.
There's also some of the best opening credits I've ever seen, which is just a super slow motion montage of zombie attacks and these really outlandish and ludicrous scenarios. And it's all set to For Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica.
Yeah, good choice of music as well.
It's quite... I think it's just... seems to be Ruben Fleischer picking the music that he enjoys, so... because it's quite random. It doesn't particularly have anything to do with the story, but it's just something he thought would be awesome, and it is awesome.
It is.
Just all the slow motion craziness unfolding in front of you is just fun to watch.
Yeah, it's a great film, and I really, this is perhaps one of my top 10 films.
Really?
Yeah, probably up there, probably near the bottom of the list, but I really enjoyed this film. Like, I could just watch it again right now. Just put it on and just watch it again. It's one of those films that I'd never really get bored of watching. Well,
in fairness, I actually just was watching it again because I had to recap it between getting home from work and starting this. But
fair enough.
I never tire of it either.
Yeah, so you see Columbus. He is traveling by foot to Columbus, and he stops as a large...
black SUV.
Yeah, black SUV is smashing through cars towards him and stops, and you meet Tallahassee, which is a kind of... you get this modern cowboy kind of feel from him. This man just doesn't take nonsense from anybody. You get that feel right at the start.
Yeah, played by Woody Harrelson, because who else could it possibly be played by? Jesse Eisenberg and Woody Harrelson in this film. It's a stellar cast all around, but really the sort of stars of it are Jesse Eisenberg and Woody Harrelson. Just have this tremendous chemistry together.
Oh yeah, they play off each other so well. One of them just kind of emanates severity and viciousness and, extreme violence right from the start till the end. And the other one is a nerd. So, you pair these two together and you're going to get a hilarious situation.
Yeah, and it's just the sort of odd couple pairing of these two that really sort of forms the heart and soul of the film. Woody Harrelson has this sort of stock and trade of... Obviously, he's done a lot of comedy in his time because he was part of the regular cast of Cheers back in the day. But he's also done a lot of really dark, intense roles like Natural Born Killers. He's done Out of the Furnace just this year. He did... I forget the name of the film, but he played like a crooked cop, like a sort of Bad Lieutenant type film a few years back. He's got this sort of line of really wiry, damaged badass type characters, and
I think that plays to his role in here. I mean, he's playing a badass character, he's playing quite a dark and vicious character, but he also needs to inject a lot of comedy into his role, so it's really taking from two completely different sides of the spectrum and having to bring them together.
Yeah, and he just plays this fantastic comedic sociopath where you get the impression that this guy could snap at a moment's notice, and it almost gets the impression that Tallahassee, he's almost glad that the zombie apocalypse has happened because it's given him free license to be as violent and as vicious to, other living beings, such as they are.
Well, he does say in the movie, my mama always told me I'd be good at something in my life. Who guessed it'd be killing zombies? And then he goes and kills some zombies.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just sort of contrasted with Jesse Eisenberg, who's just this sort of action survivor. He's not especially competent. He's just sort of good at getting by. He's just sort of barely scraping by in every situation.
Yeah.
And the two just sort of play off each other as two different sides of the same coin.
Oh, yeah. So those two meet up and, they're heading similar directions, apparently. I'm not very good at geography. So Tallahassee gives Columbus a lift. And not long after that, you learn that Tallahassee has a thing for Twinkies, a really big thing for Twinkies, to the point where they have to stop and look in a grocery store to try and find some Twinkies. Now it's here that they meet the other two main characters, Wichita, played by Emma Stone, and the younger sister, Little Rock, played by Abigail Breslin.
Breslin? I'm not sure.
Not sure either. And one of them's been bitten, and they need the gun to shoot the little sister, and it's tears and emotions all round, and you can see that even Tallahassee is a little uncomfortable with this situation, so he gives him his gun, which they then use to rob him.
Yeah, again, very irreverent bait and switch. What you think's being a very emotional and quite overwrought scene turns out to be a con that the two sisters are playing.
It turns out that these two sisters are actually fairly good con artists. You have a little flashback to before the zombie apocalypse, and you see them basically pulling this reasonably elaborate con on unsuspecting petrol stations to basically just drain them of their money. And it was really quite heartless to watch, but very impressive.
Yeah, it's this quite wry sense of humor that these two that come across as I guess sort of airheads to begin with turn out to be these really quite competent, very capable characters. Again, it's almost like the rest of the cast is ganging up on Jesse Eisenberg almost, because all the other characters are quite competent and quite socially capable.
Yeah, they seem to fit in this situation. They seem like survivors, some playing off their wits, others playing off their viciousness. But Jesse Eisenberg, his character seems to be completely out of place in this situation. Like, to the point where, as I was watching this, it did cross my mind, how did he survive this long?
Yeah, and that's sort of the paradox, isn't it? Because I think the group dynamics are the core of this film, just how these four characters play off each other. But it's also It's also taking the sort of standard zombie apocalypse template, the standard 28 Days Later / George Romero scenario, and it acknowledges that the main audience for that sort of scenario are essentially film nerds, the sort of people who would be likely to stay inside for 3 weeks at a time playing World of Warcraft. And they acknowledge that the idea of what you would do if the zombie apocalypse came about is just this sort of therapeutic power fantasy, almost. And putting Jesse Eisenberg in that situation it's almost a means to give this nerd character a sort of chance to work out all of his insecurities and all of his neuroses.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the audience will most likely identify themselves with Columbus.
I would have thought so. Certainly I did.
Oh, yes.
Don't know if that says more about me or the movie, but... So anyway, the film moves from there just across country. The four of them eventually just sort of gang up. Not before they've tried to sort of pull one over on each other a couple of times.
Well, the two men do actually get tricked again by the sisters, as their car is apparently broken down, and luckily Columbus and Tallahassee have found another car laden with weapons, to which Tallahassee replies, "God damn it, I love rednecks."
Thank God for rednecks. That's probably my favorite one-liner.
Oh, it was. That's probably the highlight in one-liners in this movie. They try to sneak up on the girl's car, and it turns out the girls were sneaking up on them. So they get robbed again. But this time the girls let them come along, because it seems like the girls were kind of feeling sorry for him at this point.
It's quite a neat reversal of gender roles, actually. I thought it was quite good how the film places agency on the girls in that regard.
Mm-hmm. And the movie then quickly moves on to explaining that the girls are heading to Pacific Playland, which is an amusement park in Los Angeles, and it's supposedly free of zombies. At least that's what a few of them hint at. But apparently that's on the other side of the country. The film kind of moves on and it doesn't show you day-by-day situations, but in the next main scene, the group reach Hollywood, in which they're kind of looking for a place to stay. So they decide to go to, where you obviously would go if you had free reign of the world.
Yeah, I think we should probably just throw up a spoiler warning here, because this involves discussion of the cameo. And if you haven't heard about the cameo yet, you probably don't want to have this ruined for you.
That's true, actually. Yeah, that's a good point.
Use your own initiative, but the cameo is probably one of the best surprises the film has up its sleeve.
Oh, it is a fantastic cameo. I didn't see it coming. It completely blew me off my feet. It took an already amazing film and put in my favourite actor of all time as a cameo, and I was sold.
So, spoiler warning.
Yep. So, they head off to Hollywood, and they go and find a mansion of the rich and famous, and they choose Bill Murray's.
This is a film that's really enamored of a lot of movie references. Like, there's several sort of just shout-outs to films like Deliverance. Obviously, the whole scenario is a shout-out to all sorts of classic zombie films, but one of the films that this movie's constantly paying tribute to is Ghostbusters.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as it turns out, Ghostbusters, I actually looked this up on Box Office Mojo. Ghostbusters is the best performing horror comedy film of all time, for a given value of horror comedy. That's just how it's listed.
So this movie is essentially kind of following in its footsteps in terms of genre and niche market.
Yeah, it's almost paying tribute to Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
In a way. It's sort of acknowledging its influence and homaging it. And to that end, it introduces Bill Murray.
Yep.
The four of them just take up residence in Bill Murray's house, as you do.
Yeah, they just make themselves at home. It seems fairly tidy, actually. I was quite surprised that the whole area of I don't know what it's called, but the rich and famous area in Hollywood, it didn't seem to have that much damage or destruction. I was a little surprised by that.
I don't know. I think they must have all been filming when the zombie apocalypse happened. I'd just choose that explanation.
But we find out that while Columbus and Little Rock go to Bill Murray's personal cinema, and start watching Ghostbusters, Bill Murray himself appears on the scene with Tallahassee and Wichita, and they nearly kill him because he looks like a zombie. Now, it turns out that he's just disguised as a zombie so that he can walk around and play golf. That is what he says.
And so Bill Murray shows up as himself, and he's basically just playing this this incredibly placid and just sort of really good-natured version of himself.
I always imagine that's kind of Bill Murray himself. He always seems to be quite a laid-back sort of man.
Well, it's a screen persona, definitely, and I imagine he's probably something like that in real life, but it just comes across so well because, for one thing, the cameo is just so out of the blue.
Oh, yeah.
And for another, it complements the scenes so well because all the characters in the movie are themselves massive fans of Ghostbusters and of Bill Murray.
Tallahassee pretty much pours himself over Bill Murray. It's just blatant adoration and hero worship for Bill Murray. Kind of, when you're looking at it, it's kind of going, yeah, this movie is just rubbing in our faces how good Ghostbusters is. And it is a good movie, but it is a little weird how much emphasis they put on Ghostbusters and Bill Murray.
But I think it's just this sort of comedic potential they get out of the scene. It's just how we're in the middle of the zombie apocalypse, and yet they're still managing to be starstruck by just managing to run across this Hollywood icon that they've all got this massive admiration for.
However, there's a bit of a problem shortly after this, where Bill Murray, dressed as the zombie, thought he would play a practical joke on Columbus and Little Rock by pretending to be a zombie down the cinema aisle. Now, this is one of those situations, and we've all had these situations, where you have this idea, and it seems like a fantastic idea, and then immediately after something horribly goes wrong, you think, that was a really, really dumb idea. Because, keep in mind, these people are fighting off zombies. They have weapons and guns.
I have to say, Bill Murray was remarkably sort of easygoing about the idea of 4 heavily armed strangers sort of barging into his home.
Yeah, I was surprised by that as well. So unfortunately, as Bill Murray is shambling down the aisle, Columbus shoots him point blank in the chest.
And that's the end of the Bill Murray cameo. Well, he does get the greatest death speech ever.
It does.
Do you have any regrets? Garfield, maybe.
Just a note, Andrew, did you notice right at the end of the credits there was a little Easter egg scene?
I only just learned about it tonight, actually. Just as I was recapping it, just when I got home this evening. I only just found out when I was looking it up on IMDb that there is, in fact, an after-credits scene where I believe it's a reenactment of a scene from Caddyshack.
Now, I knew this was a reenactment of a scene, but I had no idea what it was paying homage to.
I'm pretty sure it's meant to be Caddyshack.
It was still funny. This is one of those situations where I didn't even know what was going on, but it was Tallahassee and Bill Murray playing out some sort of scene, and it was still cracking me up.
Yeah, and really, if this film has one problem, it's almost that it plays its best card right there, and although we still have to get on to the major shootout that ends the film, it almost feels like the Bill Murray cameo would have been better suited to come at the end and just sort of have everything come to one great crescendo of comedy rather than sort of staggering it out like that.
Yeah, I'll agree with that, Andrew. I mean, that was definitely the highlight of the movie. I mean, don't get me wrong, the rest of the movie is still pretty amazing, but that is the top of the movie there.
Pretty much. But
we do get a bit of an emotional hit at this point because we hear throughout the movie that Tallahassee is grieving for his dog.
Yeah, his dog named Buck, who apparently he loved more than anything else in the world.
And you see cutscenes of him playing with his dog and feeding his dog and washing his dog, and you can see this man is just madly in love with this dog. And it's during the mansion setting that Columbus and the audience learn that Tallahassee wasn't grieving for his dog, but that Buck is actually his young boy that was killed.
Yeah, or rather was.
Was. And it's actually quite a surprising hit into the emotions.
Yeah, I'll actually agree with that because for just a fairly light-hearted comedy, this is a surprisingly quite heavy emotional scene, and it feels earned actually.
Would you say, Andrew, this was a roller coaster of emotions?
Somewhat. Also, just shut up, Daniel. You're the worst. Trying to have a serious discussion of like the mechanics of the film here, and you're just dropping bad puns. It's awful. You're a terrible person.
Sorry, Andrew. Please continue.
I think the reason this scene works as well as it does is because, again, group dynamics. The comedy in this film is natural. It doesn't feel overly broad. It doesn't feel like the characters are excessively caricatured. There is actually humanity to them.
They're not two-dimensional characters. They have, emotions and personalities and flaws, which that sounds obvious for a movie, but I would say that there are some fairly big blockbuster movies out there that have a lot of two-dimensional characters.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of the really big budget movies, the ones that get into the sort of 9 figures, you can get a lot of characters that just get drowned by all the CGI and spectacle, and everything just gets swamped, and characters just end up being fairly stock or cliched or whatever. But the characters in Zombieland, they're not overwrought, because this is a fairly short movie, and it doesn't dedicate a tremendous amount of time to characters' backstory.
No.
But they're just really well drawn personalities. They have, complexities and contradictions about them, like Tallahassee being this incredibly bloodthirsty individual most of the time, but he's still capable of having this tremendous love for his dead son.
Yeah, and Twinkies.
And Twinkies, yeah. So it just humanizes him. It makes him feel more real.
Yeah, and I think this movie also timed that situation perfectly, because that is pretty much the next scene after the Bill Murray cameo. So you've got this pinnacle of comedy and good humor and enjoyment, and then 10 minutes later, or less than that, you get this just shock to the system, and the mood just drops.
Yeah.
But it does have a little glimmer of comedy still in there when, as Tallahassee is crying about his son, he wipes his eyes with bundles of, I think they were $100 bills.
Yeah, real money, which is just quite a nice shot at the fact that money's obviously worthless in the sort of post-zombie reality.
I mean, that was funny and quite a statement to make.
Yeah, it's great. There's a lot of dimensions. I mean, it seems an odd word to use with regard to such a breezy comedy, but there's a lot of thought going into something like that. There's a lot of overlapping emotional registers, I guess you might say.
I mean, it's all very well done. All the scenes are well portrayed. All the actors are really good.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing, because just Woody Harrelson is so good in this role.
Oh yeah, he plays it to a T. I mean, I hadn't even heard of him until this movie.
Really?
Well, I might have seen him in other things, but again, I'm not great with faces, so I don't recognize him.
You'd always recognize Woody Harrelson if you've seen him.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen him in other things.
He's one of the most recognizable actors out there. It's like, you can never forget that drawl. It's like, you should watch Natural Born Killers. You'll never watch Zombieland the same way again.
Fair enough. So after this situation, the movie then picks up pace a little bit, and the next scene is the 2 girls arriving at Pacific Playground.
Pacific Playland, yeah.
That's it, Pacific Playland. And they've left the boys behind because it turns out that Wichita was getting a little fresh with Columbus, and their golden rule is you don't get involved with other people. It's just them two. So they decided to play it safe and leave them. And I thought that was actually quite a, sensible argument.
Yeah, what was the line? It's like, I really like you, Columbus, but my sister and I have to do whatever it takes to survive.
Yeah.
Like, I know that line if I ever hear it.
Yeah, that's a bit of a backhanded compliment, isn't it? It's like, I really like you, but you will get us all killed because you kind of suck in this situation.
Yeah, it's kind of an awful thing to imply about another person.
See, now, this next bit, and this is kind of the end of the movie, but I find it a bit odd. It's still, again, great, but they've gone to a amusement park, and we're talking a fairly big amusement park. Roller coasters, Ferris wheels, all sorts of rides and things. And the first thing they do is they turn on all the lights and all the music. I just couldn't help but think, you've played such a wise and straight-laced character. Would you not have thought that this is going to attract everything?
Well, I guess it kind of makes sense in terms of character logic, because these two girls, like, Pacific Playland was their end game. Like, they were just planning on getting there, and they had nothing planned beyond that.
Yeah.
So I guess it was just this idea of the two girls sort of reverting to childhood and just sort of wanting to abandon all the adult responsibilities they had for a while. And of course, that one time they let their guard down, it gets them in trouble. It is a stupid decision, but it's a stupid decision to make in character. You know what I mean?
That's fair enough. Just on a side note, apparently Woody Harrelson was in the Hunger Games.
Oh yeah, he's in the Hunger Games. He's one of the prior participants in the games in the film.
Wait, is he the guy that does the training?
Yeah, he's the one who trains Katniss and...
Oh, brilliant! He's like the best actor in that movie.
Yeah, obviously.
I'm going to watch more things by him. I'm beginning to really like this guy.
It's like, just watch Cheers and then watch Natural Born Killers and your head will explode.
Fair enough. So, to finish off, basically, the sisters attract all the zombies for miles around, and they come in droves, and they end up trapped on a drop tower ride, which, one of those rides that lift you right up into the air and then just drop you straight down and then lift you right up. And as they're being dropped down, the zombies are kind of getting closer and closer, and one of them manages to shoot out the control panel, so they get locked up at the top. But of course, I'm quite surprised, but these are very smart zombies.
Well, they're smart enough to climb. I'm not sure how smart that counts as.
However, I was thinking that, but very early on in the movie, when you see Columbus's first introduction to a zombie, which is his attractive neighbour, she manages to very quickly open the door. Now, I know that doesn't sound difficult, but zombies chasing people up vertical towers and opening doors, that's quite a big jump in terms of zombie intelligence from your stereotypical zombie.
Well, I mean, in Day of the Dead, one of them worked out how to use a gun.
Yeah, well, let's just not...
They're not entirely brain dead. Come on.
That's true, but I've seen Day of the Dead, and I don't remember anything about it, because I was so unimpressed by that movie.
Oh, you're just terrible.
I'm sorry, it just annoyed me.
You weren't watching the remake, were you?
Probably. I was watching the most modern one.
Okay, yeah, no, don't talk about the remake. We don't talk about the remake of Day of the Dead.
I didn't enjoy it.
Well, I haven't watched it, but by most accounts it's like a terrible remake of the original from the 80s, and the original from the 80s is awesome. Go and see it.
All right.
It's on Netflix.
We'll put it on the list.
Yeah, do that.
We could put the remake on the list.
Is the remake on Netflix?
I don't know. We'll have a look. So, anyway, Tallahassee and Columbus arrive on the scene. Columbus goes and kind of rescues the girls. He gets chased a lot, and seems to be completely helpless, and then accidentally kind of rescues the girls. But then that kind of perfectly fits into his character arc anyway. Tallahassee, on the other hand, has pretty much the most badass scene that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, it's essentially just this enormous pitched shootout just around all these sort of carnival attractions. And he just sort of loads up with all sorts of heavy automatic weaponry and just leads the zombies a merry chase and just picks off hundreds of them.
Oh, yeah.
And you think this is going to be the sort of action movie cliche where the hardest character is the one who gets sort of sacrificed so that the protagonist might live, but as it turns out, no, Woody Harrelson is too badass for that.
Well, that's the thing that surprised me about this movie as well. I was listening to the music and, trying to get a feel for that scene, and there is a moment where you've got Columbus basically pinned down by a zombie. You've got the two girls stuck in the drop tower with zombies pretty much clawing at their feet, just about to get them. And you've got Tallahassee trapped in this little wooden booth, just shooting and shooting as dozens and dozens of zombies climb all over and start smashing in the roof and the walls. And I'm thinking, this scene looks exactly like someone's going to die. And for a moment, I couldn't remember what happened. I was like, does somebody die here? I'm pretty sure somebody doesn't die, but the music, the tension, the way the camera kind of, the scenes shoot from one person to another, all looking very desperate. I'm thinking somebody's going to die. And no, nobody dies, which is great.
It's a great subversion of what you actually come to expect from a zombie film.
Yeah, it got me well and truly.
Yeah, and also you've got Columbus's sort of the conclusion to his character arc, because he's really got a lot of phobias and insecurities, and that's sort of what's led him to sort of shut himself away from the world all this time. And he explains early on in the film that one of his biggest fears is clowns, even more so than zombies.
Yeah.
So naturally, what does he encounter in the carnival other but a zombie clown?
Oh, what a
Obviously.
hilarious zombie.
Yeah. And, of course, he manages to confront it, and it's essentially the end boss of the film, if you like. He manages to sort of face his greatest fear and overcome it, and in doing so, save the two girls.
Yeah, and he also breaks one of his own rules, which is kind of showing that he's kind of advanced and developed beyond these simple rules that have tied him down for so long.
Yeah, and the rule is the one that he identifies himself as the most important one of all, which is don't be a hero.
Yeah.
So that's essentially the way the film concludes, is he learns to be a hero, essentially.
Yeah.
He learns to sort of put himself on the line for others, and it's a pretty beautiful character moment. It's really well handled.
Yeah, so the film kind of finishes there, you know, they get rescued. Tallahassee basically emerges from the wreckage, passing over a pile of corpses. He seems so happy. And just the last scene, I think it's the last scene. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the last scene, that makes me laugh so much, is as they're kind of chatting, they hear a noise at the door, and Columbus turns round and takes a couple of shots through the door. And they go over to investigate. Quite a tense scene at that moment. They open it up, and loads of rats run out. But when Tallahassee looks in, he sees that one of Columbus's shots has pretty much blown up a box of Twinkies.
The last box of Twinkies in the entire world.
And it's such a great scene because Columbus just says, I am so sorry. And Tallahassee just puts up a hand and goes, I can't remember if he says it's too painful or if it's too fresh. And it cracks me up because he looks so angry at Columbus. And just to add a nice ending to it, Little Rock pulls up in the SUV and throws a Twinkie to Tallahassee, and you've never seen that man smile so much through the whole movie as when he's devouring this Twinkie.
Sort of a plot point that becomes a bit funnier in retrospect, considering that it was only a few years after this film got released that they actually discontinued Twinkies. So the jokes actually become funnier in retrospect.
Yeah, see, now that is some good cinematography. Future-proofing your movies to make them funnier.
In retrospect.
Yeah.
So it's like somebody involved in this movie was a seer.
Yeah, or somebody involved in this movie was heavily involved in the Twinkie company, and they made the movie and then sabotaged the company from the inside.
Maybe the Twinkies company was one of their sponsors, and they gave them an insight into the way the Hostess company was going to go.
That's probably it.
And now we're just getting thigh deep into conspiracy theories, so we're probably best to sort of stop recapping the film at this point.
So, overall, I love the hell out of this movie. It's got a bit of everything. It's funny. It's got some really good moments, some great characters. It's well scripted. It's well acted. You know, all the characters are played by actors that pretty much slot perfectly into those roles.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's an incredibly brisk film. It's over in less than an hour and a half, but in that time...
87 minutes, apparently.
87 minutes, yeah. And in that time, they've managed to take these 4 characters and really establish and humanize them. Managed to take them through all sorts of emotional beats and registers. Managed to give them some comedy. And this is even without talking about the technical aspects of the film, because there's some really great gore effects here. Like, there's one scene early on, I think it's the earliest fight scene with the neighbor, 406.
Yeah.
Yeah. You actually see Jesse Eisenberg close the door on her foot.
Oh, that is
and,
graphic.
like, you see the bone poking through. Which is, for a comedy that's, not hard horror, that's pretty intense stuff, and it's really well done with prosthetics. There's a minimum of CGI in this movie.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even the bits of CGI they do have is really well done.
Yeah, very much so.
I mean, they make it obvious CGI. Like, again, the rules. They're not trying to feed it into the environment and blend it in so it's, it might stand out if it isn't done perfectly. They make it very obvious CGI, but they do it really well.
But even then, it's difficult to even capture what makes this... It's difficult to talk about comedy analytically, because, when you break down a joke and explain it, it's, you're taking away from what makes it funny. So you really do have to watch this film just to get some of the really great, sharp one-liners, and they are incredibly sharp, some of them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know I love this film, but even I know there are several inside jokes and things like that this movie pays homage to, and I feel like that I don't get those jokes. Because, I think I've not seen them.
One of my favorite ones was just Woody Harrelson's goodbye scene, just near the beginning of the third act, where he's temporarily parting ways from Jesse Eisenberg, and he says, "I'm not much good for goodbyes, but later, pig."
Yeah, that'll do, pig. That'll do. Which is that's even a tribute to Babe.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I think that's the movie, Babe. I used to love that movie when I was a child. It's basically a movie about a pig that thinks it's a dog, and it's a tiny one-liner in that movie, and yet they still pay tribute to it in this. It's fantastic. And, of course, Columbus's reaction is just as good. Wow, you really aren't good at goodbyes. That's the worst goodbye I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah. Again, it's just little snappy lines like that just sort of subvert the whole what you think the scene is going for in terms of emotion, and just sort of turn it into this farce. And it's great. There's so much just tradecraft going on at every level in this film, and though it is a relatively simple, relatively breezy comedy, it's got a lot of complexity to it. It earned its box office take, it earned its critical acclaim, and I really hope they do get around to making a sequel to it at some point, which has been rumored.
Well, from what I could find, it is on indefinite hold.
Which is unfortunate, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because I will actually say this thing for it. I mean, for all that movie culture these days is drowning in unnecessary sequels and remakes and what have you, this is a movie I think that does leave itself quite open to a sequel.
This movie and Pixar's The Incredibles.
Yeah?
There's the 2 movies that I'm desperately waiting for a sequel for.
Well, The Incredibles did kind of get a sequel. I mean, there was the tie-in video game. It's like, but that doesn't really count, though, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It's like the villain who shows up at the end of The Incredibles, the Underminer. Like, they actually made a game called The Rise of the Underminer.
Oh, they need a film. Oh, this just irritates me.
It's like, for all the Pixar films they made sequels to that they shouldn't have. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel your pain, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. But then you've got some classic sequels that, are loved by all. I don't know, Transformers.
You're just never going to let an episode go by without doing this to me, are you?
I just like it when you have high blood pressure.
Yeah, I do that to myself easily enough. It's like, I don't need help.
I lined that one up a little too well, talking about sequels and...
Go and watch Day of the Dead, you asshole.
Go and watch Transformers 4. I've never heard a sentence being used as a weapon, but that might be as close as it gets.
I'll do it if you watch, like, all of the movies I tell you to watch ever for the rest of time.
No. Not going to happen, because you'll probably pick some horrible horrors.
Yeah, that would be the plan.
Yeah, I know. And that's why I've never picked Transformers for us to review.
Good. I'm glad. You're a good friend.
Because I know you've probably got some pretty unpleasant horrors that you might want to watch, but I'm hoping you'd hold off on them as well.
Yeah, I could. We're sort of at a stalemate here. We're sort of at a state of... What was the phrase from the Cold War? Mutually assured destruction?
So, just final thoughts, Andrew?
Love Zombieland. Go and watch it. Jesse Eisenberg and Woody Harrelson have actually reunited once since this film, incidentally. They were both in Now You See Me just middle of last year, where they again had great chemistry together, and I would have liked to have seen more of them on screen at the same time. So just get those two guys back in films as often as possible. But mostly I want to see them again in Zombieland 2, if it ever gets around to happening.
They do need to start, getting their ass in gear, some of these movie makers, because again, like we, to reiterate what we were saying earlier, there's a lot of great potential sequels out there that people are letting us down.
But above all, watch Zombieland, because it is pretty much the zombie comedy of the 21st century to me. Sorry, Shaun of the Dead, but
ooh, that's a big statement. Shaun of the Dead is pretty amazing.
It's honestly my least favorite of the Blood and Ice Cream trilogy.
Really? What, including the third one? Because I really didn't like the third one.
I love the third one. I love The World's End.
I did not like that. When that comes on Netflix, we're going to have to do it.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're rambling on again, Andrew.
We are.
So, if that's all for you, Andrew?
That's all for me, Daniel. And this is the end of our first phase of podcasts, I believe. So we need to sort of decide our next batch.
Should we leave it as a surprise, Andrew?
I don't see why not.
That would be a nice surprise. I'll just say that I had a brief discussion with Andrew about this, and it's a different movie. I'm surprised by the choice, but it's a different movie. So we'll see that next week.
Yeah. Anyway, until then, have fun. This has been Two Friends Watch. I'm Andrew.
I'm Daniel.
And see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Mm-hmm.